From 2Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello, Keto Lovelies. I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds, and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein, scale to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guest each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. This week's show is about the Public Health Collaboration Conference held in London on the weekend of the 19th and 20th of May. The Public Health Collaboration is a charity dedicated to informing and implementing healthy decisions for better public health. In the UK, 25% of adults are obese, the highest prevalence in Europe. And type 2 diabetes has risen 65% in the past 10 years with no sign of slowing down. Both cost the NHS £16 billion a year. The PHC publish evidence-based reports on the most pressing public health issues, alongside coordinated campaigns and implementing initiatives for improving public health. The director, Sam Feltham, ran a fitness bootcamp for 5 years, which he closed in March 2016 to focus fully on running the PHC. The founding members are a combination of medical professionals, all dedicated to pushing for real change. You can find out more about the PHC and show your support by subscribing to the newsletter for just £1 at phcuk.org, or donate more to get all sorts of other goodies. Louise Reynolds and I start and finish the podcast with a discussion about some of our highlights from the conference, but I thought it would be nice also to hear from some of the people attending and find out a bit about them. I recorded these snippets during the pre-dinner drinks on the Saturday evening and the coffee breaks on Sunday, so there is a certain amount of unavoidable background noise. Maybe get yourself a drink, unless you're driving, of course, and join us in the party atmosphere. Welcome back, Louise, to the Keto Woman Podcast. It's great to be chatting to you again today.
Thank you, Daisy. It's great to be here again.
Maybe you could just give us a bit of an update, because you were my first Extraordinary Woman, but things have changed a little bit for you, haven't they, which enabled me to go to the conference with you this weekend. Perhaps you could just tell us a bit about that.
Yes, I have come to the UK. I'm taking up a teaching position at Anglia Ruskin University, which is in Chelmsford in Essex, and I'm teaching in the Bachelor of Science program, honours program in paramedics. So I'm returning back to higher education, and I've taken up a teaching position here in the UK. So I've told my family I'm having a gap year. I'm having a gap. I'm having a gap year from Australia, and I'm having a gap year from teenage boys, and taking up a position here in the UK. So I do hope that I've sort of said I'm over here by myself, so I'm being a bachelor girl. I am in share accommodation, which is very interesting, and I make a bit of a joke about my gap year because I'm developmentally delayed by about 30 years in share accommodation and having my abroad gap year. So this gap year may last 6 months or it may last 5 years. So not really sure. Just taking it one day at a time, and just embracing meeting new colleagues, doing loads of training at the moment, so all that onboarding, induction training, and getting to know the curriculum, and really looking forward to immersing myself in the teaching the students in paramedics, and really embracing wanting to get out there and make a difference again in higher education.
And what do you make of the UK so far? Enjoying it?
There are some things that I really like, and there are some things that I am finding, how would you say, challenging. Some things that I've really liked, and thanks to you and putting me on to Cornish clotted cream. I have discovered that that delicious French chocolate that you brought me over makes a great cracker for Cornish clotted cream. Yes.
Great stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And sausages. You're liking the sausages
The
too.
chipolatas are just to die for. And so you put me on to also the Co-op, so I can get 2 packets for £5. And so they make a couple of meals for £2.50. I'm just getting used to the currency, so I'm trying not too hard to convert that back into Aussie dollars, because I get a bit of a currency shock every time I go back and think about how many Aussie dollars food is. It's relatively cheap. It's not expensive. As you know, we went to London on the train, so I went, wow, that was 30 shekels. So I'm not going into currency conversions. Otherwise, I just have a little bit of a heart attack there. But some things that are challenging is obviously the weather. I've just coming into summer, but it's very much like Melbourne weather. It's 4 seasons in one day. So I go out dressed for winter, and then the sun is shining, and then it starts to rain. But now I understand why our Australian Commonwealth forefathers left this great island for better climate. So
you have to learn to layer. It's all about layers for UK weather.
I'm sure.
Then you're set for everything. Because if you layer up, you can just strip it off for when it gets really hot in the afternoon, and you're good to go. You'll learn the tricks.
I did see the Daily Telegraph this morning on the news feed say that it's going to be 30 degrees. It's going to be a heat wave this Sunday. So I don't know what's going to happen at the Chelsea Flower Show. All those wilting flowers, along with my fellow, Englishmen, will all be wilting in the 30-degree heat wave this weekend.
They will. It's supposed to be a heat wave here as well. So, but you'll see what it's like in the UK when it gets really hot and the sun comes out. Brits are so not used to it. They really make the most of it, and this is just this wonderful sort of party atmosphere in the air. They love it, and that's something quite nice to harness. I think you're going to enjoy that.
Well, my initial observation is whenever it's over 15 or 16 degrees, then we do actually see a lot of skin. People walking in shorts and T-shirts. So I think the barometer, once it hits the magic 16 degrees, everybody does start to remove some of those thermal layers.
Well, we need the sun. We need to top up on vitamin D. So we went to the Public Health Collaboration Conference at the weekend, and what a time we had. It was fantastic, wasn't it?
It was actually a really great, well-organised conference, and I think the most impressive thing was that, of course, apart from meeting you, and I can actually testify to people that, yes, you are real. I have met you in real life now, so IRL. I have met the great Ms. D, and it was a well-run conference. As an academic, I've been to many, many conferences, and you're at a low-carb conference when they serve pouring cream. If anybody follows me at Dr. Lou Reynolds on Twitter, that was obviously one of the tweets that got retweeted quite a lot, actually. So I posted a picture of the pouring cream by the coffee station. The food was really good too. It was actual low carb, not a piece of garlic bread in sight, or bread or any other pastas and cereals.
They did a good job, didn't they?
They certainly did, and that's obviously a testament to the commitment that the conference organisers stayed true to, obviously, the messages that they were sending, because a good conference runs on good food to obviously power you through all that brain cognitive energy that you need to absorb all the information.
Exactly. Sam Feltham, who is the main organizer and the guy who set up the collaboration, put a great deal of effort in, and it really showed, I think.
Yeah, the quality of the speakers. I know that there were competing conferences at the time. There's a low carb cruise that's on at the same time, so obviously some of the rock stars were on the cruise, but what was really refreshing about the program was that there was some great case studies and examples of how low carb and obviously in general primary healthcare, public health in practice, and it was really great to hear how in practice people are using the messages about improving diet quality, improving physical activity, and obviously empowering patients or clients and yourself to make those changes in your own health.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, for me, it was particularly nice. Although I live in France, I'm a Brit, obviously, and I consider UK as my home turf. And so it was lovely to see so many British speakers and to find out more about the movement that is going on in the United Kingdom. And it was really heartening to see so many GPs and medical professionals there amongst so many other people as well. Met a few personal trainers, which was nice as well, because, they get a bad rap for giving what we consider anyway dodgy dietary advice, and met a couple of women who making great inroads and having, a really considerable ripple effect with a lot of people. I think that, that's what's important, isn't it? When you get the kind of people, influencers, I suppose, key influencers in the community that can really impact change. And so it was nice to see so many of those kind of people there.
It was really good because we obviously heard from on the program, there was a couple of GPs, but also there was one cardiologist. So that was really good. And obviously we know through Siobhan Huggins, her recent interview with Brett Scher, who's a US cardiologist with his Boundless Health podcast. But in practice, it was good to also hear from David Kevin, who was a diabetologist, and he was talking about not only his experience here in the UK, but in Bermuda. But obviously there was some other notable other GPs in local practice as well. In Scotland, there was the Scottish GP, and also Joanna, who has Fat Is My Friend. So she's another GP as well. So it's actually really encouraging when we know from obviously KKB, and we hear so much about our colleagues who the women, when they say they don't actually have a good hearing from their primary care physician or their GP, that these GPs on the program were really happy to be embracing the messages and supporting their patients in making very positive lifestyle changes.
Exactly. And we haven't got time to talk about all the speakers at the conference, but so we thought we'd focus in just on a few of them. And as it's a Keto Woman podcast, we thought we'd focus on some of the female speakers, which also certainly for me were some of my favourite lectures. So maybe we could start with Zoe Harcombe, whose lecture was entitled Kettles, Calories and Energy Balance, What Went Wrong? And she was really, wasn't she, discussing the laws of thermodynamics and their application, or shall we say misapplication. And she made the whole psycho joke, didn't she? And her frustration with how people talk about calories in, calories out, and how they insist that it's just some kind of simple algebraic formula, and you can just very easily balance the numbers on each side. And she said, we really need to be talking about energy, not about calories. It's not about weight. It's about energy, and how energy out in particular is made up of so many components. It's impossible just to have this simple algebraic formula. And I think you enjoyed that presentation a lot as well, didn't you?
It was amazing how she sort of myth-bust the whole sort of, Chico, calories in, calories out, as you said, that particular formula. And it really, gets at the heart that thinking that, the calorie being energy, cannot be created or destroyed, but really, and how that applies to the body. And I know recently Jason Fung had a blog post about this as well. But you're right, and where she was breaking down the component parts was in terms of the equation, understanding and unpacking around basal metabolic rate, around your total energy expenditure, and also your non-physical activity energy that goes into that hidden sort of stuff. When you're just sitting on the couch, you're still using energy. And the great thing was that she used the metaphor of the kettle, and where she was looking at how energy goes into heating the water and how obviously energy goes out through steam, and how that's not just as simple as the energy in, energy out.
The kettle analogy she used was that heat moves from the element, so the hot element, to the cold water, and energy is lost in creating energy because there's a certain amount of inefficiency with energy lost out the spout. So I think it was the fact that the energy was getting lost out the spout,
Sure.
Indicates that it's just this, it's not this simple balance. It's not this simple equation where something on one side equals something on the other side. And she spoke a bit about, didn't she? And I think you might have the origins of where that statement came from. But this statement that 3,500 calories
Sure.
equals a pound.
Sure.
So you either are going to gain a pound for every extra 3,500 calories you eat, or you can lose a pound by expending an extra 3,500 calories.
So let's go back to where she used the metaphor of a kettle to explain how energy goes in and energy goes out. So the heat that goes into the water to boil the water, and then we see energy going out through steam, through loss of temperature, through steam escaping out of the kettle. So where we see that analogy then go further is the 1 pound of weight loss is translated to 3,500 calories, because as we know, when we burn energy, and in particular when we burn carbohydrate, there's 4 calories. For carbohydrates, there's 9 calories for fat, and this then becomes that algebraic formula for when we're wanting to lose 1 pound of fat, we need to have a calorie deficit of 3,500 calories. So this was attributed to a lady called Lulu, where Zoe sort of mentioned, where did we get this 1 pound equals 3,500 calorie deficit? This came from 1918 and a lady called Lulu Hunt Peters. So, it's just interesting that way back over 100 years ago, that we have been perpetuating. You must be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. Whereas when she broke down the formula of basal metabolic rate and total energy expenditure and non-physical activity, she could actually then explain each of these component parts are not as simple as the in and the out, because there's so many other systems that are involved in our daily activity and our daily expenditure. So it didn't become an idea that it is as simple as ins and outs or of calories or of energy. It's actually got nothing to do, the laws of thermodynamics have got nothing to do with weight. It's all about just the energy.
Mm-hmm. And it was, she cited Weight Watchers in her presentation about just using this straight algebraic formula and having images and in their plans where basically I think she cited the example of walking on a treadmill for half an hour allegedly expends 134 calories or something, 164, something like that. But the Weight Watchers philosophy is, well, if you burn that off, then that means you can eat an extra 164 calories. And, one of the points she was making was that that's you on a treadmill, but what they don't take into account is the amount of calories you'd be losing if you were doing nothing. And so that in itself makes it not a direct equation that you can just compare one with the other, but that it's just ludicrous, as you were saying, because there are so many components that go into both sides that you can't simply equate half an hour on the treadmill to a bag of crisps. It just doesn't work that way.
Which was interesting, because then what she did was to take off you said, the calories on the supposed calories on the treadmill. Then you needed to actually minus all of those, what would be your typical expenditure just sitting on the couch. And I think the net difference was only like 30 calories. So that 30 calories now is, in a sense, is, there's a net deficit, but it's not as big as what we think it is, because all of those underlying metabolic processes in terms of our basal metabolic rate, our total energy expenditure, and just if we were just sitting on the couch, is only, not a whole cookie or a bag of crisps. It's only basically even not a third of a cookie.
Yeah, a few crumbs.
That's right. Well, I did, the Australians in the Australian listeners will know that a Tim Tam is about 110 calories. So it's not even worth taking it out of the packet.
No. The other thing I liked, a very simple slide, but very effective, was the insulin-glucagon balance. And down on the insulin side, talked about how insulin is something you want to switch off because, this is when insulin is produced, this is when you store fat. And in practical terms, she said the way you can do this is to stop grazing and to use the right fuel, i.e. lower your carbohydrates. On the other side is glucagon. And you want to enable this because this is when you can burn fat. And in practice, how to do that is to move more. And also she mentioned limiting alcohol. And I thought it was quite interesting. She had a couple of points about alcohol. She made a point earlier saying that we can't store alcohol in our bodies, so the calories are irrelevant. This is when she was talking about calories. However, and it's a big however, and it comes into play on the glucagon side of the equation, when she says that alcohol does impair glucagon production, hence switching off that magic fat burning that we all want when we're asleep. And it also impacts sleep quality, which is also going to have a negative feedback. So I thought that was quite interesting because people often ask about alcohol on the ketogenic diet, don't they? And how it's going to impact their results. And some people talk about how it's a bit like pressing the pause button. And I think that is quite a good way of describing it. But, the information she gave us just gave us a little bit more details about what's happening behind pressing that pause button. I certainly found that interesting, and it made me want to restrict my alcohol intake even further. I mean, I don't drink an awful lot, but it made me think about that 1 or 2 glasses of wine, several times a week. Maybe it should just be at the weekend or something. It certainly made me think twice and want to restrict how many days I was having alcohol.
Which is really good, because certainly when we go back onto the other side, when we're wanting to switch off our insulin, that if we're going to be managing our carbohydrate and making sure that we have the right fuel, that what happens, from what I understand with having alcohol, it's that first pass. It goes that first pass through the liver, and obviously between the liver and the pancreas, we're wanting to get that tension right between switching off insulin and enabling glucagon. So if you remember way back, obviously at the start of our keto journey, and we might have watched Robert Lustig's.
Exactly, I was just thinking that. And he compared fructose to alcohol, didn't he?
And I think that first pass, when we go through the liver, that it's preferentially burnt first, that we're actually, preferentially giving our energy over to alcohol as opposed to the right fuels. But we do actually have some low carb options, and I remember Megan Ramos had that really great app, which was the Ontario Control Board app, which will inform you of how many carbohydrates that you have available in, obviously, alcohol options. So,
of course, I mean it's always best to choose the lowest carb option when you're having alcohol, but I just thought it was an interesting point that the alcohol in itself that doesn't have an impact from a carbohydrate point of view. Obviously, when you're having wine, there are some carbs in it, but if you're just literally looking at the alcohol component and the impact that has on glucagon, that just made me think twice. But it was a great presentation, and I know as she was saying she was wrapping up, I was like, what? This it feels like it's only been going for 5 minutes. But let's move on to another one. I think one that we both enjoyed was Dr. Jen Unwin and Charlotte Summers, who's from diabetes.co.uk. And their presentation was called Bittersweet, Food Addiction and Type 2 Diabetes. And as the name suggests, it was all about sugar addiction. And it was one of those audience interaction presentations, wasn't it? And they actually used the DSM-5 criteria for substance use disorders, which I don't think they told us that until the end, did they? But they basically listed out a series of questions, and I think you're going to give us a few examples of those in a minute. But the idea was they put a question up on the screen or a statement, and if it applied to us, we needed to stand up. And then after all these questions, they told us where it came from, that it was about substance use disorders, and they sort of gave numbers, so if you were 0 to 2, it was one thing. If you were over 4, it implied that you had the beginnings of a food addiction. I think there were different levels, weren't there, for how bad your addiction was, basically, and how much it impacted your life. So maybe you could give us a few examples of the statements that they put up.
So there's a series of 11 statements, but I won't read, obviously, all of them out. And you can actually Google DSM or 5, which is the V, the Latin V, substance abuse questions. And you can obviously read the 11. So the first one that really resonated with me was taking the substance in larger amounts or for longer than what you were meant to. And in terms of thinking about food addiction or sugar addiction, this is thinking about that medium-sized Domino's pizza or the bag of Doritos, and thinking that I can stop at 1 or 2 slices, or maybe a few chips, but actually eating the whole packet. A second example is wanting to cut down or stopping using the substance but not managing to. And that's really thinking about wanting to, say, start the diet on a Monday but only getting to 3 o'clock and, really tripping up.
Giving in to those hangry cravings.
Certainly 3 o'clock and the sleepies. So the other one that was really sort of resonated was development of withdrawal symptoms, which can be relieved by taking more of the substance. And this is when you're thinking about if you were giving up pizza or Doritos, but knowing that you needed to actually, that was your fix. So those sorts of food fixes were actually, become quite a play on your mind. And that sort of certainly led to her. They gave 4 points as to why food is addictive.
Yeah, I think she called it the mechanisms of addiction.
So the 4 points of the mechanisms of addiction was the hyperpalatability, and we have seen that certainly with the way that food is engineered, and so salt and fat, and Doritos is a great example of that.
And sugar as well, that magic trio, salt, fat and sugar. And I seem to remember someone talking about this on the TV ages ago, where they were doing a study about it, and they said, Snickers bars absolutely hit that. They have that perfect sweet spot of sugar, fat and salt that's just irresistible.
And they talk about bliss point. So it's that sort of magic combination between and how the food is engineered. So the second one was about tryptophan and how that actually interplays with serotonin. So that's your feel-good hormone. So tryptophan is an amino acid and is a precursor to that particular hormone.
Yeah, they said, I know the notes I took were that, feel-good neurotransmitter, and actually that it is preferentially taken up in the presence of sugar.
Right.
So obviously by eating sugar, you're going to get more of that feel-good neurotransmitter.
So number 3 was obviously the food reward systems and dopamine. And this is a really big one that we do actually often hear about, our food reward systems and how that's triggered that particular neurotransmitter dopamine in the brain.
Yeah, and dopamine is released when we eat sugar, so it's no surprise.
The fourth one was the negative reinforcement.
Yeah, behaviours that reduce negative feeling states are reinforced, and the relief from withdrawal and cravings that you so desperately desire. And a point that I found very interesting was they picked up on a correlation between sugar addiction and type 1 diabetes, mostly to do with this negative reinforcement. And that was something Ian Lake spoke about in his presentation as well. And I just thought it was interesting that type 1 diabetics in particular seem to suffer from sugar addiction. But it was a fantastic and sobering presentation, I found. I mean, I was up and down in my seat, I think 7 times. So, I hit a lot of those criteria, which, I kind of knew already, but it was very interesting watching the rest of the audience and seeing how many other people were up and down too. So I think that's something for both of us, that we're all too familiar, aren't we, with addiction?
I certainly think that was obviously, that sort of certainly resonated with me as a former morbidly obese woman, that I didn't get there without some behaviours, some eating disordered, or I didn't like the word eating disorder per se. I didn't have a particular diagnosis, but I certainly did have disorderly eating. And there was some obviously elements of binge eating, but for me, it certainly resonated, the power of how food is engineered into these particular addictive behaviours. The category that she mentioned was EDNOS, which is eating disorder not otherwise specified, and that certainly is a global kind of criteria that encapsulated obviously these non-diagnosed types of eating disorders.
Mm-hmm. And it just really illustrated to me how, by eating certain foods, it just becomes nigh on impossible, if you have a sugar addiction. And, you know, when I say sugar addiction, that's not just literally the sweet stuff. You know, we're talking about starches and all kind of refined carbohydrates. The impact that has on our body when they break down the mechanisms of addiction and they show us why it affects us the way it does. It just becomes so clear how it feels so impossible sometimes to control that addiction. And actually the only way you can do it is to abstain from it pretty much altogether if you can. And then all those symptoms of a lack of control that you feel actually do start to alleviate, but you can only do that by getting rid of it completely.
And that certainly resonates with me with Gretchen Rubin's work again about being a moderator or abstainer. And that's works for me. I certainly know that works for me.
Exactly. And the people in the audience who only stood up, you know, between 0 and 2 times, well, they're probably moderators. They're people who can moderate these substances. But anyone who's going to be standing up more than, say, 4 times, they're going to have to be abstainers because they're not going to manage otherwise. Well, the last one that we talk about, I mean, there are plenty we could talk about. We could talk about every single presentation, but we don't have the time. But the one that I thought would be nice to focus on, I think, would be Claire McDonnell-Liu, whose presentation was entitled Food First, A Patient Perspective. And I think it's nice, especially with the podcast overall focus being on ordinary women who have extraordinary stories. And she was an absolute classic example of that, wasn't she? Perhaps you could explain a little bit about where she was coming from, what her story is.
So Claire is a mum of 2. She has a son and a daughter. Her son had some skin conditions and she had some old family photos of these hives and welts. Both were from just touching, so obviously just a contact, as well as one that these welts that would appear after eating certain foods. And that for her and her husband started on their Just Eat Real Food movement. So they came across obviously the work of Weston Price, and they certainly took a whole foods, just real foods approach for when their son was very little. Then their daughter was born, and I think it was around about 6 months. Their daughter had a first seizure, and naturally they thought it was related to teething, so it was a febrile seizure. So they were managing their seizures, obviously looking and being very careful around temperature regulation and temperature sensitivities. But unfortunately, these seizures were becoming more frequent and obviously not now primarily temperature sensitive. So that sort of led them down the path of how were they going to be managing the child's seizures. And these were tonic-clonic seizures as well as partial complex. I think that was the condition. So as they discovered, they were given choices between, here in the UK through the NHS and the paediatrics, of either the ketogenic diet or medication. So, and they were using sodium valproate, which is a standard anti-epileptic treatment. They were very much perhaps not discouraged to use the diet, but they weren't necessarily sort of strongly encouraged to obviously go the medication route, because they were certainly given the choices, but certainly prescribed.
Well, certainly on the slide she put up a slide, didn't she, that was ketogenic diet versus the medication, and she did say on that she was advised against the ketogenic diet, but it was the medication that was recommended,
because it was the established treatment, and they were saying that obviously the ketogenic diet, even though it has fewer side effects, they were advising against it because it was hard to sustain, it was unpalatable, there was poor compliance, and only when there was in the presence of incontractable epilepsy. But because the daughter's seizures were obviously intermittent, that the medication was recommended because it was the standard treatment.
Yeah, the list of side effects on the medication side was huge, wasn't it?
Oh, and she put this up. So, starting with aggression, anemia, confusion. And then when she's highlighted on the slide that, convulsions. So why be giving an anti-epileptic when it's going to cause a seizure? Deafness, dementia, learning difficulties. And obviously this was at the time of obviously the onset. This child was from 6 months onwards, and they were obviously very concerned about the impact of managing her seizure activity and not wanting to impair any further development. And her husband happened to be an Australian, and that's how I got talking to them over at lunchtime. So they decided to take some time out from the UK, and they came to Australia to basically start their ketogenic diet. While they were in Australia, they thought that it would be easier to do that away from medical supervision, and they were able to do keto while travelling here in Australia for, I think it was up to 12 months. So, and then they were basically, on their way home to fly home back to the UK, and she mentioned that her daughter had a seizure at the airport. Oh, but obviously because they were still doing diet only at that stage, obviously the paramedics and the hospital were wanting to again encourage them to reconsider their diet only approach. So coming back to the UK, Claire and her husband Justin have set up a foundation called Leafy, the Leafy Foundation, and you can find
Leafy.org.
that Leafy.org. And where they do nutrition education, and she has gone into schools to take on a real foods approach to educating.
Yeah, she's been doing what they call the SENS project, hasn't she, where
Yes.
they were going into a special needs autistic school and showing the impact it was having on these predominantly autistic children, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, special education needs children.
And it was really profound, the difference in just a week, I believe. They just went in for a week and they got some volunteers to go with the food program that they wanted to do, and got them involved, I think, in the preparation as well, and really made a big difference.
So being a mum of two, her son's skin is clear. The daughter's epilepsy is well managed, and they don't do the classic children's epilepsy ketogenic diet.
No, she was saying that, wasn't she? Yeah, they use a modified keto diet, still high fat, low carb, obviously, but they just switch the macro ratios around a bit. And I believe she said it was a 2-1-1 protein, fat, carbs with 10 grams of carbs per day. And she said the benefits of this over the standard keto diet for epilepsy was that there were no liquid or portion restrictions, a wider food variety, and less fat. And before everyone goes, what, less fat? We're talking about here the not need to be basically drinking neat oil, which quite often on the epileptic ratios that they use for the ketogenic diet, the amount of fat that needs to be consumed means that these kids have to drink, neat olive oil or coconut oil, and that's where it becomes difficult for them to adhere to it. And she's found that this modified approach works very well for her kids.
And that's right, and they don't want to be making it highly unpalatable, because obviously you're going to be getting poor compliance if you're having to make children drink loads of fat. It was interesting talking to them that they were talking about that they use deer fat, a lot of deer fat, and they make balms for their skin, their son's skin, for his skin condition, out of deer fat.
Nice.
If you don't want to eat it, you can rub it on your skin.
So yes, the positive things that that she found, and a great long list, but just some of them, was a massive reduction in the seizures, both the long ones and the short cluster episodes, both reduced dramatically. A real improvement in her behaviour, her sleep, her development. And what I thought was really nice and really touching was that both children are really, really proud of their diet and are strong advocates for it. And I think we were talking before, and you mentioned something that the daughter likes to say to people.
Apparently when she sees somebody have a cold, she'll go up to them and say that my special diet will help you. So why don't you try my special diet? So she's a great advocate for not wanting to, feeling restricted by a diet, but her diet actually helps the way that she feels, and wanting to impart that onto others.
Exactly. We took the opportunity during some of the conference breaks on Saturday night with the pre-meal drinks, and also on the Sunday during the coffee breaks, to talk to some of the people who were attending the conference. And we met some really interesting people there, and went up and presented them with the mic and asked them to just share some information with us, really, about who they were, what they were doing at the conference. So there's fair bit of background noise going on, but I think that just adds to the atmosphere.
Well, my name is Fiona Benson, and I come from York, and I'm here because I'm an ambassador for the Public Health Collaboration and a member, and have followed the project ever since it was first started, because I so believe and I have such a passion for eating real food and getting a break from the power of big food and big pharma. Let's get the science coming.
Fantastic. And what do you think of the conference so far?
Oh, brilliant. I mean, we came away last year just being overwhelmed. It was just so amazing.
It's wonderful, isn't it, being surrounded by like-minded people?
Yes, and all your stars, and being able to talk to them and enjoy what they've got to say and listening to them. Absolutely.
And looking forward to tomorrow. There's a good lineup tomorrow as well, isn't there?
Oh, brilliant. And being able to see the prof in real life. What an amazing thing he's done. I mean, he's an amazing man.
I know, that was lovely today when he got the standing ovation, wasn't it?
Oh, wasn't it perfect? And so deserved, because what he's been through is unbelievable.
Very well deserved.
Oh, yes.
Well, thank you very much for talking to me.
You're very welcome. And enjoy the rest of the conference.
I will, and you.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm at the conference mainly because I'm very interested in the low-carb way of life, ketogenic way of life, in fact, which I've followed for the last 2.5 years. And effectively, it's cured me from all my ills. I've lost a load of weight. My type 2 diabetes is in remission. My blood sugars are probably lower than normal, and it's great. I think everyone should do it. It's a new way of life for me, and hopefully it'll last forever.
And what do you think of the conference so far?
It's pretty good. There have been some very inspirational talkers and some really good topics as well. It's all been interesting and definitely worth a visit. And I'm really looking forward to tomorrow.
Yeah, Professor Noakes tomorrow.
Indeed, that's the big one.
I
was at last year's as well, where there were some big names too. Jason Fung and Andreas Enfield were there, and Ivor Cummings, who I think's here tomorrow. He's attending. I'm not sure he's speaking, but it was great. So this year's turning out to be a good one as well. So
it's good to see great speakers here in the UK, isn't it?
It certainly is, and it's something we need a lot more of, and a lot more publicity for the cause.
We do. America's a bit spoilt for all the low carb conferences, isn't
Definitely,
it? We need more here.
They get them all, and they get the best ones as well. Skiing, cruising, they're just amazing. Hopefully one day I'll get to go there, and the Australian ones, of course, which will be good too.
Exactly. Well, thanks very much. Enjoy tomorrow.
Thank you.
My name's Malcolm. I'm here because for the last 4 years I've been on a low-carb diet that's changed a number of things in my life. I got introduced to that by my wife, who's a personal trainer and has looked into diet and weight management for a long time, and this diet seemed to be the thing that explained things better to her, and she explained it to me. And I came at it from not a public health or a weight loss background, but one from an endurance running background.
Okay.
I was particularly interested in the notion that I could run a long way and I didn't have to take sugary products with me wherever I went.
Run on fat.
Yes, exactly. And so I've been writing a blog on that subject for the last 4 years. It's called
tell us what the blog's called.
Low Carb, High Fat for Runners.
Okay.
And in that, I've kind of gone through the science of the diet, the science of running, and it's been a really enjoyable thing to get immersed in. But I've also beaten my marathon PB in that time, and I enjoy running long distance a lot more than I did. I don't run into a wall anymore because there isn't one. And I might be slim, but I've got a lot of fat to burn, so I can keep going a long time.
Fantastic. What do you think of the conference so far?
That's great. Great speakers, really enjoyable, a lot of interaction, and a lot of people are deeply committed to what they're doing, which is always lovely to see.
It shines through, doesn't it? Fantastic.
My name's Helen. I'm here because I was introduced to this group of people by Jane and Malcolm, Jane being my personal trainer. My husband and I got interested in low carb, high fat diet, mainly how it would help us with sport, because we both like endurance sport, and also, so I'm a convert to it. I feel that it's helped me feel better and perform better, and I'm here mainly because I'm a GP and looking for ways in which I can pass this information on to my patients, which is not easy because it's not current guidance. So I found it helpful talking to other GPs and finding out ways that they manage to integrate it into their practice. So it's good to meet a sort of a highly select group of very enthusiastic people, and it's made me more enthusiastic about it.
Do you find you have to be a little bit careful about the advice you give in your practice?
Well, I always end up having to spend a long time doing the introduction of the fact that this isn't mainstream advice, this isn't what other doctors and maybe even my diabetic nurse will tell you, but it's something that you might be interested in, and I tend to point them towards reading that they can do themselves.
Fantastic. Great work.
Great conference.
I always say when GPs get on board, the spread, the ripple effect that they can achieve is fantastic.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I was very hearing David Unwin talk about how he regained enthusiasm for general practice. That was very powerful. Yeah, very powerful.
Definitely.
And yeah, I'll take that message back to my partners.
Great speaker. Brilliant. Well,
okay.
Have a good day tomorrow as well.
Thank you.
I'm Jane. I'm an ex-PE teacher and I retrained as a personal trainer just about 10 years ago now, and I found that I could get my clients really, really fit, but weight loss was another thing, and I started to question everything I'd been taught about weight loss and started looking into it, and that's when I came across Zoe Harcombe's work and her book The Obesity Epidemic and How to Cure It, and it's just made sense immediately, all the questions I'd had. I just was looking at calories and the whole calorie formula and everything she talked about today, and it wasn't working for people, and I was so frustrated that it wasn't working for people who I truly believed were trying really hard to lose weight. I didn't believe they were just fat and lazy. And it was so refreshing to see a different take on it, and so from there everything leads from one thing to another, and you just start on this sort of snowball of people who are finding out about this stuff, and it's been amazing over the last few years to watch it grow. We when Tim Noakes' Red Book came out, the Real Meal Revolution, we used to import it in lots of 9, which is the most the company would send from South Africa to give to our clients. And it's now known in our community as the Red Book, is the recipe in the Red Book. And to have it on Amazon now is just amazing, and I can go into clients' houses and look in their fridge and they no longer think I'm insane when I say, no, you want to put butter in there, no, you want to put full fat milk. They don't, it doesn't sound so mad anymore, and that's really, really exciting progress. So it's brilliant to see what Sam's done. I came across him and got involved with what he was doing, and that's what made me want to be patron of the PHC and get the thing off the ground and be that little part of it. So it's very exciting.
And you talk about how you got into it from, hearing about Zoe's work, but a couple of other people here have just been talking about how you got them into it. So tell me the name of your business. Give it a shout out, because it sounds like you're spreading the word.
It's Aspire Fitness Solutions, and we're based in Hassocks in West Sussex, and we take people out running and we do fitness classes, and I do personal training, but we really encourage a real food diet. So we've got quite a real food community that I suspect if you were to pinpoint where all the Red Books are at the moment, there'd be a little sort of splash of colour around hassocks, because there's a lot of people using that and a lot of other resources, which is exciting, and quite a lot of people who would honestly say, after years of yo-yo dieting, they're just eating this way, or they're fueling their running, which is really exciting. And Helen actually did used to run with a waistband full of energy gels, so watching her not do that is just brilliant, because it's not good for you long term to take on that much sugar. And if you're doing one thing because you think it's good for your health, running, and then you're doing the other thing of shoving yourself full of sugar to fuel that exercise, it becomes a concern.
Hello, type 2 diabetes.
Well, exactly, yeah. So
fabulous part of the world to go running as well.
Well, it is beautiful, and that's much more my point of running, is let's get outside in the beautiful local countryside than it is
fresh air,
let's
so
burn
much
some
better than a
calories.
treadmill.
So I never trained to be a gym instructor. There is a place for gyms and they work really well, but I try to pick up the people for whom the gym isn't a place. I was really interested in all of that, because PE teaching, I can see, is letting down more people than it's helping. I'm really interested in Zoe Williams' work. I thought her talk was interesting, and I'm interested in the work she's doing with young women, because I needed to stop PE teaching, partly because it doesn't work well with my own children, but partly also as well because I don't feel that we're not doing it properly. It's not fit for purpose. There are many great PE teachers out there, but actually what we want to do doesn't actually work to get kids more active. And I pick up quite a few of those. I pick up teenagers who come along and say, I always hated PE. I was just fat and useless, or unfit and useless, and that's how they genuinely ended up feeling after years of compulsory PE. So it is a worry about what we're doing and the messages we're giving.
Exactly, especially to teenage girls.
Yeah, completely. And having a 17-year-old who's myself, who has gone through secondary school and was playing all manner of sport when she went into secondary school, and has come out playing doing very little in the way of sport. And I just feel, she's got parents who are active and fit. She will come to it. She knows her stuff. But the world that our teenagers live in is a huge concern, because what they want to do is eat the crap. It's huge. They partly want to be where they see their role models be, but they partly also are told all the time that they should be able to, eat junk food, and that's what being a teenager is about. And it's a tricky situation. Yeah.
Well, it's fantastic to hear a personal trainer approaching diet in this way, because so often actually, I've come up against personal trainers on Facebook and things, and they're
macro,
for the most part, and very traditional.
Matter.
Exactly.
Yeah, I fight it. It's
a real breath of fresh air.
Just amazing, and I'd like to know when they go around through with the slides on the insulin response and just saying, oh, this is just proven. I've had people on social media tell me that the insulin hypothesis has been disproved, and that the keto diet is dangerous, particularly for middle-aged women. Now, I'm a middle-aged woman, and I work with a lot of middle-aged women, and we all feel better
still alive.
Yeah, and then the whole addiction stuff that Jen and Charlotte just did is fascinating.
Fantastic.
Because it does go deeper. It's not just as easy as saying eat bacon and eggs, which does huge things for many people, but we lose a lot of other people along the way.
I think I was a 7.
Yeah, no. Well, I think and some of the passion in the room comes out of the fact that most people have been there. David and Jen are standing up, and they've been there. Zoe understands food addiction and sugar and being given the wrong advice and always trying to be on a diet, and that really helps the whole thing.
Well, thank you so much
Very
for talking to me.
exciting event. No, nice to talk
Thank
to you
you.
too.
My name is Vipin Bhardwaj, and I'm a GP in England.
And why are you here at the conference today?
So this is the third PHC UK conference, and this is my third PHC
Brilliant.
UK conference. And I'm here partly to increase my knowledge, partly to mingle with like-minded souls, and maybe a tiny little bit of actually imparting some of my knowledge, because I have sort of contacts with the likes of David Unwin and Zoe Harcombe, Campbell Murdoch and others.
Fantastic. And how do you find it in your own practice? Sharing this kind of dietary information gets some people into trouble. How do you find it here in the UK?
Well, I hope to God it doesn't get me into trouble. That's for sure. It's in the NHS. It's actually a very difficult issue. Not necessarily because it's controversial in terms of the diet, because let's face it, a low carbohydrate diet has only been around in written form since about the 1860s, so it's hardly new.
Exactly.
The British Journal of Nutrition, I think in about 1956, wrote that every woman knows that carbohydrates make us fat. Graham Greene wrote a textbook in the 1950s. No, Graham Greene's brother,
Right.
Raymond Greene, who was a preeminent endocrinologist of his time, wrote a chapter in the endocrinology textbook of the time. And then there's Sir William Osler textbook of medicine from 1911. So this is not
It's
new.
nothing new,
This is
really.
not new. The problem for us is that we have operated an incredibly reductionist model over a generation, because whenever anybody has a problem or a symptom, we can offer them a pill. And that is, to an extent, what we have learned to do, and that's what we teach. And I'm not telling you anything that you haven't heard before. I'm sure that we as doctors get very little nutritional training. But furthermore, the commissioning mechanism has almost sort of forced that upon us. And so what we really need is to move away from that and move towards a much more behavioural support model, which is really, really productive. It makes the patient feel better because they come off their medication. It makes the doctors feel better because their patients feel great. But that actually takes quite a lot of investment, and that's the problem. So when you ask me how does it feel in terms of everyday practice, it feels good, but it would feel a lot better if we could actually roll this out to about 70% of the population that really need it, whereas at the moment we can't do that.
So, yeah, you're in a bit of a tight spot. You don't want to offer the pills, but sometimes that's all you can do, or you're reliant on the patients you have for having enough get up and go and motivation to take it on board and run with it themselves, rather than having to go to a program.
I guess the beauty of the modern world, with the internet, podcasts like your own, the internet resources that are out there, Diet Doctor, PHC's own information, the information from diabetes.co.uk, all of that information is now means that that knowledge is actually quite democratic. And one of the things that I've noticed is that on occasions when I bring this up, the patients are there ahead of me. They actually say, "Yeah, I know about that, doctor. Why didn't you mention that 2 years ago?" Which is mildly embarrassing. So yes, there's limits to what we can do, but there are also opportunities that are presented through technology. And so even if I feel that actually I can't necessarily offer the patient the full support that I want, what I can do is I can say, look, just sign up to Diet Doctor and you're away, or listen to, a podcast and you're away. Now, there is obviously a problem there. If they're on medication, they need assistance in demedicating, and that's actually quite difficult, and that's quite scary for a lot of GPs. So there are definitely issues that need resolving in that respect.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And it's, like you say, it's a difficult balance to maintain, but it really does feel now like things are changing and really definitely moving in the right direction. And it's GPs like you. I have a GP who's quite happy for me to go in and say, well, I've been reading on the internet and I would like this blood test because I think this might be an issue, and this is the way I've been eating, and I've been telling him about keto, and he's interested. And, they're the kind of GPs that really do seem to be growing in numbers, because ultimately that's what you train for, isn't it? To help your patients and to improve people's health. So it's frustrating when you can't do that.
No doubt, yeah, no doubt about that. It is what we train for. But and I'm sure the NHS isn't unique in this. I've spoken to practitioners abroad. Every health service is constrained, but sadly, commissioners and perhaps vested interests don't quite want to let go of that slightly reductionist, farmer-based approach.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, same old problem. Well, thank you very much for talking to me this evening.
You're very welcome.
I'm Hannah Boethius. I am one of the co-founders of the Low Carb Universe, which is a bigger-ish, it's an international event for low carb that we have in Mallorca for the third time now.
Oh, I've heard about that and I've really wanted to go. It looks
you have your chance in November.
It looks fantastic.
And I am the other part of the Low Carb Universe, of course, and I'm Bitte Kempe Björkman. And you said it all. Yeah, I don't know what to add. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about your conference. So it's been going for about the same number of years as this has.
We're organizing it for the third time now, and it is. We've done basically an event that we would like to attend ourselves.
Yeah.
So we mix a lot of lectures with workshops, so that you can really get into the questions that you burn for, and so that you can get the answers that you require to have. And it's also one of the very few events that is 100% low carb. Yeah. So everything is low carb, from the food to the mini bars to the bar to everything.
We control the mini bars in the rooms.
Nice.
We think if you're going on a health event, this is a health event for us. You should not be able to. You should. It's so.
It should be fully immersive, shouldn't it?
Yeah, with the right food, and we've been talking to the chefs, and they are like magnificent because they didn't know anything about this because they are Spanish, and they are like, okay. But we went there, and he sent us a menu, and he nailed it. So it's and the funny thing is, we were like 75 people, all in all, in November, and everyone said afterwards, it was like the food was created just for me. Because if you're 75 low carbers, there are 75 different ways of eating low carb. But everybody was so delighted with it. So
difficult to please everyone, but it sounds like you did.
No, we did it, or the chef did. Yeah, they did. They nailed it. Yeah.
Perfect. It sounds. We're going to Keto Fest in July. Have you heard about Keto Fest? It sounds like it has that similar, combining the conference with workshops and activities. Yeah. They have a social Saturday, and then again in the same way, all the food is completely keto. Exactly. Really immersive experience.
But instead of converting a whole little city into keto, we take one hotel in Mallorca and
that's
make it
good
all
enough.
low carb for 1 week.
We'll take Mallorca in a few years.
Yeah.
Got to start somewhere.
We'll start with a hotel.
Of course. Lovely to talk to you ladies this evening.
Thank you.
And good luck with the conference.
Thank you very much.
So my name is Martina, and I run a blog called ketodietup.com. And me and my partner created an app called Keto Diet years ago. That's actually how we started back in 2012.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've been running the website and the app, and I also started, I wrote a few cookbooks a few years ago, and
so you've been busy, I bet. You've seen a progression in sales and interest on the app?
Yeah. It's been continuous work for us. We never stopped working on it. It's something that evolves, and we have new ideas, and we have great feedback from people, so we always add new features. We actually have a big update coming soon.
Yeah, I know Louise was very excited when she saw you sitting next to us. She was fangirling. How are you enjoying the conference?
Oh, it's amazing. I'm really happy that we have an event like this in the UK. It's the first event I went to in the UK, actually.
Yeah, we need more, don't we? I was just saying earlier that
we definitely
the US is really spoilt for conferences. We need some more here.
Yeah.
And who are you looking forward to seeing tomorrow?
Tim Noakes, definitely. But I've been enjoying every single talk, and I think
really
all people took part are amazing.
Yeah.
And I just hope this is going to spread the good news and help people make the right choices, because that's what it is about.
Exactly. Thank you for talking to me. I hope you enjoy tomorrow.
You too. Thank you.
I'm Rachel Stevens. I am trained as a teacher, but at the moment I'm a stay-at-home mum of 4, and I am really new to keto. Probably up until about 6 weeks ago I'd never heard of the Public Health Collaboration, and I just happened to an old school friend of mine has epilepsy, so she was telling me about the ketogenic diet she was on, so I started Googling things and fell down various YouTube wormholes and came across names like Steve Finney, Jeff Volek, and then I came across Professor Tim Noakes' deposition videos, all 83 of them, and I got hooked on them and watched every one.
That's a big old rabbit hole.
It was, yeah. I was copiously writing notes and pausing to Google words. I had no idea what they were. Then I wrote him an email to say how impressed I was at his tenacity just to keep searching for the truth and to stand up against all the allegations and to fight till the end. And then he replied and said he's coming over to England, and if you live near London, why don't you come down? So that's how I'm here.
Fabulous.
I had no idea about this venue.
You
or
were
this.
invited by Professor Tim Noakes.
Yeah, and I had no idea quite how many unopened emails he has until I bumped into the lady at the Noakes Foundation stand today, and she said he's probably got about 10,000 unopened emails in his inbox. You're lucky he opened yours. So it's been really, really interesting. But I've gone from 0 to as much as I can absorb in 6 weeks, and it is just so inspiring. So apparently he pings my email off to Nina Teichholz and Zoe Harcum and Professor Karim Khan, is that the other one? Yeah, so they all know my email. And
wow.
Anyway, it's been really interesting, and it's so inspiring to take this and take it forward. So I'm keen to get kids on board now, because that's my remit, is working with kids. So somehow I'd like to translate that into.
What about your kids? Have you managed to persuade
them? They're on board
them?
now. Yeah, they've been on board, and they were doing really well until the royal wedding party at school, and everyone took cakes in and whatnot, and then they came home feeling terrible. So it's a lesson learned there.
I was going to say it's annoying when that happens, but it is really useful for them to see, how bad they feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it helps them make choices going forward, doesn't it? Because ultimately it's got to be their decision.
Yeah, absolutely. But I've been an advocate of hydrating kids in school, and it's taken me 2 years to get the school to get water bottles in and have them on tables. My next stop is change your food up, and that's going to be massive. But I'm quite interested in seeing how I can affect some change there. So see what happens.
Like you're going to watch this space. This time next year at the conference, I'll be speaking to you again and finding out about everything you've done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. I hope to have some news. Yeah.
I bet you will.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking to me.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's John. Business-wise, I'm a hospitality trainer, so not in this field. Just taken a personal interest over the last few years for my own health and lost 3 stone. Started following people like Professor Noakes a couple of years ago, following his trial closely, so it was quite a good speech listening to him today.
I was going to say,
quite moving and motivational, I thought.
You must have really enjoyed that.
Yeah, very good. And then it was actually from watching a similar thing last year, or maybe one of the American Keto Fests. I left it on, and
Fest, that's the dudes.
This English name came on, this English voice came on, and it turned out it was Sam, and I started looking into it more and realised how much was going on in this country. Along those lines then, it was just after he'd done last year's conference. So after that, I started watching all the bits from last year's conference and picking up more and more and finding out who was doing it in the UK. So it's good to see a lot more homegrown people talking about it and not having to follow all the other international stars. But
it's great, isn't it? I predominantly work with Americans and have an American audience. It's really nice to be on home turf and see what's happening here.
Yeah, it's good.
A lot.
I think we could do with a lot more of it.
Yeah.
They have quite a few, but there are bigger places,
They're spoiled for choice, aren't they?
Yeah.
Cruises, skiing resorts. We need a few more.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, it's good. I mean, I was at another event earlier this year, Gary Taub's talk, and that's when I started seeing more and more of these, the English doctors, the Scottish guys. There's a lot more of it about, which is good to see.
So you'll be back next year, I bet?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Hopefully for both days next year, and the dinner.
Yeah, dinner was great. You should definitely get to that next year. Well, thanks for talking to me.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and I'm a practice nurse at Preston Grove Surgery in Yeovil in Somerset. My speciality is diabetes, and over the last 17 months, since discovering low-carb healthy fats, I've been able to really help people get control of their diabetes, and I've had many patients that have been able to put their type 2 diabetes into remission, and patients with pre-diabetes reverse as well. Lots of patients losing massive amounts of weight. One of my patients, in 1 year, he's lost 9 stone, 5 pound, 59 kilograms.
That's incredible.
Amazing. I'm so proud of him. So that he's done that with low carb, healthy fats and intermittent fasting. It's actually given me goosebumps just telling you. And I'm just tell everyone
really
about
proud
him.
Of him.
So proud. And he's become quite an ambassador and talked for me a couple of times. We also run a diabetes and pre-diabetes support group now at the surgery, and he spoke to 25 patients a couple of weekends ago, and it's just amazing. He's so inspiring. And then when I have patients that just have such amazing results, it just inspires me and motivates me even more. So on the back of all of this, with the brilliant results I've been having, I've been nominated by 5 patients with diabetes and pre-diabetes as the RCNI Nurse of the Year Award, the Patient's Choice category. So I'm absolutely so honoured and so proud to be nominated. And it's been a brilliant platform here because of the low carb and all these lovely, lovely people. I've just had an incredible weekend.
Hold on a minute, there's a public vote, isn't there?
Yeah.
Tell me where we can vote for you.
So if you go on the RCNI website, so it's RCN Patient's Choice Nurse of the Year Award. My name's Catherine Cassell and I'm the second one down. It takes seconds. You just press vote, put your name and your email address down, and that's it. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy.
Okay, so vote for you.
Yeah. And then my moment of my day today was not only listening to Tim Noakes and crying because it was so emotional at the end.
What an incredible lecture
Amazing.
that was.
I just don't think there was a dry eye in the house.
The emotion in the room was incredible.
Yep.
And the standing ovation, how long did it go on
Ages.
for?
But so well deserved, and what he's been through, and to be able to stand there and talk to us and tell us about it. Such a humbling man. Beautiful, just a beautiful man. So when I came out, I thought I've got to get a moment with him on my own, and I asked somebody to take a photo, and I've just got the best photo on my whole camera.
It is. I'm looking at it now, and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's not your typical selfie.
It's not, is it?
It's the two of you looking at each other and with genuine crinkled eyes, laughter. It's fabulous. That's a selfie to be jealous of.
Totally.
I managed to get one, and it's nowhere near as good as yours. I'm very, very jealous.
I'm already thinking, what hashtag, what words am I going to put on Twitter later with that? But it needs to be simple.
I think it's going to be I don't know, there's probably going to be a string of all sorts of hashtags, isn't it? Moment with my hero.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's just a moment, and it just says it all. And it absolutely caps this whole weekend. It's just been wonderful. It's like being with a whole new set of people, but a whole new family. And everyone comes together, and you're all supporting each other. You've all got the same mind, and it's just beautiful. I've just loved it.
Me too.
So thank you.
Really, really enjoyed it, and it's nice to catch up with you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll give you a cuddle.
So I'm Olivia, and I'm a GP doing private health screening in London.
Right, it sounds like you've got a bit of an accent there. Where are
yes,
you from?
so from Australia originally.
And you're enjoying the conference?
Loving the conference, yes, absolutely. I came last year and, couldn't wait to come back again.
So tell me a bit more about yourself. You were just mentioning before we started recording that you're type 1 diabetic.
Yes, I've had type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. Always followed the traditional low-fat, carbohydrate counting, carbs with every meal, progressively needing more and more insulin, putting on more and more weight, always struggling to get good control despite doing all the things that I thought that I needed to do. and just sort of thought that was it. Yes, and then it was actually when my husband got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and started doing a bit of Googling, and actually he likes podcasts, and found the Two Keto Dudes diet doctor and said, have you heard about this low carbohydrate, high fat thing? You should look at this. So I did.
Fantastic. And how long ago was that?
So that it's probably coming on to 4 years that I've started researching this. Been really converted to low carb, high fat probably 3 years ago, and started the intermittent fasting just over a year ago, and that's been the biggest game changer for me.
Right, so you've seen big improvements. You've lowered the amount of insulin you can take.
20 kilos lost in just over a year with very little exercise because I don't have time at the moment. Dropped, come off an insulin pump, insulin was over 150 units a day down to less than 50, so massive changes.
Fantastic. And what about in your work in the surgery? Are you able to influence your patients at all?
I've been quite lucky, I think, because I work in the private sector, so I'm not perhaps as constrained by the NHS, but I was very upfront when I went for my interview and said, look, I don't prescribe a low-fat diet. I don't believe in it. I've done a lot of research. I'm very interested in low carbohydrate, high fat, and basically they said, look, as long as you feel that what you're telling patients can be supported by evidence, you can tell patients whatever you want. And I feel very strongly with all the research I've done that the evidence is on my side, so I feel very comfortable in just making people aware that this is an option, because so many people have never heard of it before. And when you talk to some people who've struggled with their weight for so long, pre-diabetes, and just keep getting told the same advice, when they find out there's another way, it's quite amazing. So, I just sort of say, look, you might want to go and look at this and do some reading, make up your own mind, but I'm just, presenting that there's maybe a different option.
That's it. I mean, you don't have to be really forceful with it, do you?
No.
It's just literally, like you say, presenting it as an option.
Yeah.
And then obviously if they look into it and decide it's for them, then they've got you to support them through that process, which is such a benefit, because so often people are finding that's exactly what they don't have with their GP.
Absolutely.
Although here at this conference, I have to say, it's just keeps putting a smile on my face to be meeting so many GPs here who are making that change.
Absolutely.
GPs and personal trainers seem to be the two people that I've been meeting who are really affecting change. Anyone who's in contact with lots of people, fantastic. That's what you want, isn't it?
And I think also, as a GP, it can get quite depressing when you're telling your patients the same thing: eat less, move more, eat less saturated fats. Your diabetics who are following the advice for their dietitian, and their blood sugars are not well controlled. We're coming close to having to talk about insulin because it's not working with the medications. For so long feeling like, well, that was the only option. You fail the medications, the oral medications, so we're going to need to put you on insulin. To have something else to offer those patients, it's amazing. It's great to feel positive about, I think a situation where a lot of GPs kind of do get a bit disheartened by it.
It must be doubly frustrating, mustn't it, when you found something that you've seen work so well for yourself, for your partner, probably for some friends and family, and yet you can't be offering that advice in a professional capacity. It feels like your hands are tied. So it's refreshing to see that even perhaps a bit more limited in the NHS, GPs are starting to be able to push it a little bit more.
I think absolutely, yes,
Fantastic. And highlights of the conference?
Oh, I think it's got to have been Professor Noakes this morning. I mean, that was just,
mind-blowing.
It was. I had tears.
And emotional. Who didn't? Is there anyone who didn't?
I don't know, but I mean, I certainly did. I think for me, hearing him talk and everything that he went through, and being able to admit that he was saying, it was right there in front of my eye, but I didn't see it, and the way that we can be blinded by that bias and not see what's in front of us. So, yes, I think for me that's just been, It was wonderful.
That's what I've always respected so much about him. It was I think it was the first documentary that I watched was Serial Killers. And that scene right at the beginning where he literally rips pages out of his book and says, I got it all wrong.
Yes.
you've just got so much respect for someone like that.
Absolutely.
And he spent, half of his lecture today telling us about all the things he did wrong
Yes.
and how the evidence was right in front of him and he still got it wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to go back to every patient I ever saw where I told them that calorie counting was the right thing to do, to, eat less fat and, but I guess you don't know what you don't know at the time. Yeah.
Exactly. I think the important thing is that when you realise what you thought was right was wrong, you change. You don't stick with it because you feel like you can't say that you were wrong. It's fine to say. Nobody's going to blame you for saying the advice I gave you 10 years ago, I'm afraid was all wrong.
Yes.
Because you were doing the best
you
you possibly could at the time.
Yeah.
But now you've learnt new things, and now you know that wasn't the best advice, and you've got better advice to give.
Yes. And I think I've heard Aseem Malhotra speak at another event, and he basically said, you stop being a doctor when you stop learning. And I think that's we've got to constantly be learning and re-educating ourselves because the evidence changes or it's interpreted differently or new things come to light. You have to be open to things that you've clung to for years are going to turn out to actually not be right. So you've got to be willing to, accept that, assess the evidence for yourself and kind of move on. Yeah.
Keep challenging it.
Yeah.
What you 100% believe in now,
Yes.
you need to keep challenging it. Keep
absolutely.
seeing if there's something
Yes.
new.
Yeah.
Keep trying to break it
Yeah.
down. And
Yeah.
if you can't, then it's solid, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for talking
that's
to
my
me.
pleasure.
Hope to
Thank
see
you.
here next year.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name's Jackie Wood. I have a number of strings to my bow. I'm a sports coach and a dance fitness teacher and a physical activity professional. I work for a leisure trust in a role where we encourage people who wouldn't normally be physically active to become more physically active. So we have target groups like women and girls, disabled people, older people, and maybe just people from a lower socioeconomic background. I have had a weight problem, really, I feel like since about the age of 10. And was your typical...
I identify mine starting about then too.
Typical trying all the different diets in the world. I was very successful at a very low calorie meal replacement diet. Lost 3 stone in 3 months.
Tell me what it was. I wonder if it's the same as mine.
It was called Light to Life. It's called Light to Life now. It was called Lifeline when I did it. Unfortunately, as we heard earlier, it's not maintainable.
No.
So after stopping it, I then put all the weight back on and an extra 2 stone. Got quite a poignant diary of the time, reflecting on the challenges associated with restricting your calories. Interestingly, I think if I had known then what I know now about intermittent fasting, I might have used it differently. But anyway, so then I was left with this extra weight, and I finally lost the extra weight through a paleo approach, which just seemed, on reflection again, seemed relatively straightforward. Then I got stuck. Then I was here last year and heard Jason Fung talk about intermittent fasting, and I can use that to lose weight. It's a challenge because not eating does seem counterintuitive in these days. I know, thousands of years ago it wouldn't have been. I trained as a nutritional therapist because I'd read nearly every book that was going, and I decided I would do the course instead. That was really interesting, quite challenging, quite stressful. I did realise after I finished the course that I was training to help other people around nutritional stuff, not just weight loss. And actually I'd done the course for myself. And so I didn't keep that up because that therapeutic relationship is really hard. I realised I didn't want to work with the people who could afford the £50 an hour price tag. But because of my journey through the nutritional maze, shall we say, I came across diabetes.co.uk and I heard about the PHC, absolutely resonated with me, and I think I signed up there and then. heard about the first conference, which sounded great. Took too long to sign up for the conference, and then Sam was asking for volunteers, and I'm like, pick me. I actually used to work in a conference centre, so he was completely sold on my credentials. And in actual fact, I really like being part of the team. I'm not a qualified GP, so I'm not going to be the likes of David Unwin or Seema Lutra. But
makes it special being part of the organisation team, doesn't it?
And I'm not sure if that's why I didn't get so emotionally. I got so emotionally affected this morning, and I think it's because it really resonates with me, that whole thing about working on this together towards the end. And I have so much respect for Sam Feltham, for him to have pulled this all together in the way that he has, that his commitment. I just have so much respect for him that I am happy to help him in whatever way I can, which is one of the reasons why I have started on the ambassador.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Right. Well, essentially, it's almost key people across the country who are prepared to, I don't know if lobby is the right word, but to speak to GP practices, medical centres, those sorts of people, and try and get the message out there.
Really push it to the local influencers.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. And we've got the leaflets. The thing that I find difficult, whilst I have no problem chat, particularly when I'm passionate about something, I'm happy to talk it through. I'm not the sort of person, I'm not a salesperson. So when you phone a GP practice and you say, can I speak to the practice manager, and you have to go through the gatekeeper, who's the receptionist, I find it really difficult because I know how busy they all are. The way I found best was to ask for the practice manager's email address and then to try the email. 8 times out of 10, they don't come back to you. I have a friend who works in the NHS. I asked her, did she know of any GP practices that would be more amenable? So I did get a few of those. But
once you get in with one, presumably that's perhaps something you can add to your email. Say, I've got such and such on board, and thank you for talking to me.
That's absolutely
Wish
my
you luck.
pleasure. Thank you.
My name's Tony Butler, and I come from North Somerset. I'm a retired doctor. I used to be a student health physician. I retired some 8 years ago. At the time, I was overweight and hypertensive, and my family had health problems. And after I retired, I discovered quite independently that there perhaps was an answer to this through nutritional lifestyle change. And as a result of that, I lost weight, lowered my blood pressure. My wife reversed her diabetes. For a long time, I felt very alone in this and didn't know anybody. But in the last 2.5, 3 years, I found this huge network. And as a result now, I've helped to set up a very lively group of doctors and nutritionists in the Southwest. And I'm now networking with people all over the world. And it's really, really very supportive. We all endeavour to try and reduce this terrible global problem of diabetes and obesity that is bankrupting every medical system in the developed world, is impinging on so many millions of people's lives, is making medicine expensive and difficult. It's only a small thing yet, but I think we're on the upward slope, and I think this conference and all the people here really feel rejuvenated by coming together and carrying on with their work, because we feel this mission is so important.
And tell me a bit about your involvement here at the conference.
Right, well, I came to the first conference in Birmingham, and I was asked to be a volunteer to operate the registration desk, and I led the team there, and I've done the same for Manchester, now London. It's a great privilege to work. Sam does a huge amount of work behind the scenes. My involvement is very small. Great team of volunteers. It's been more or less the same group over the 3 years, and we just enjoy meeting people at registration when they first come, answering their queries, and it's a great privilege to be here, really.
Well, and we're very grateful for you, because I know it's these events only run smoothly because of volunteers like yourself.
Well, yes. I mean, but we're perhaps the visible side of this on the days of the conference. It doesn't say anything really about the huge amount of work. I mean, I've organised conferences in the past behind the scenes, and that they are incredibly hard work. But
and it shows how much work and how well that work's done by the end result.
Absolutely. Every conference has been brilliant, and they get better and better as they get more experienced. And I would say that having been to medical conferences over 40 plus years, student health conferences were really good. We were a strange bunch of doctors, but we got on very well. But this is absolutely amazing. The delegates here are so positive. The networking is so fantastic. The encouragement that we feel. And it's not just that blip that people normally feel when they meet. You go home, and then when people meet again, they tell you how they progressed. And, the work that comes out subsequently from the encouragement here and the inspiration is just fantastic.
And I know I've heard a few of the speakers mentioning what a warm and receptive audience we are, which is nice to hear.
Absolutely. Yes,
it's nice that they feel comfortable and really enjoy giving their presentation.
So many lectures in academic institutions are so stuffy. And occasionally you get a laugh when you get a really good inspirational speaker who perhaps get half a dozen laughs in a lecture. But here, the interaction with the delegates, the interest in what the lecturer is saying, the backup appreciation and the applause, quite unusual for a conference.
Well, thank you for talking to me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for your work.
Not at all. Thank you.
So just to round up, really, I thought it would be nice to list some of the quotes, some of the great takeaway quotes from the conference. And you know what I'm like with making my memes for the social media posts. I thought it would be nice to get some of those quotes written down. So the first one is from Trudy Deacon, who's from the Expert Health Charity in the UK. People who eat more than 3 times a day are more likely to have food addictions. So that ties in well, I think, with the Jen Unwin and Charlotte Summers talk. And also with this next one, which is from Zoe Harcombe. Unless you are a cow, stop grazing. That one always makes me laugh. But it's so true, isn't it? I mean, how many times do we say to people in the Facebook group, really try and cut out that snacking and grazing, because of course you're just spiking your insulin all the time, and when you're doing that you're potentially storing fat. And this one is from Professor Tim Noakes. You don't die of diabetes, you die of the treatment and the mismanagement of the disease. Which again, I mean, we all know that, but the medical profession in general still talks about type 2 diabetes as being a progressive disease, when we know it's not, or it doesn't have to be. You can reverse it.
And that's so true when he was talking about the diet that's recommended as part of that particular treatment. So he was really honing in on the story of his father who had a type 2 diagnosis and didn't die necessarily of diabetes per se, but it was the treatment and the management of his diabetes that ultimately was part of his chronic and progressive decline.
Exactly. And another quote that's from Dr. Scott Murray, which was his take on the "you can't outrun a bad diet" quote. And he says, don't compete with what you eat. And that was really, again, going back a bit to the Zoe Harcombe calories in, calories out balance. It's all about, not competing with what you're eating, not trying to balance what you think is going out with energy expenditure, with what's coming in. So I have a feeling I know who you're going to talk about when I ask you this question, because I think we have the same answer. But what was your favourite part of the conference?
My favourite part of the conference had to be Tim Noakes. So Tim Noakes really, for me, was such a highlight because it was through his book, The Real Meal Revolution, that my mum came to find low carb, and that was, many years ago. So through Tim and his publication, my mum then ultimately, encouraged me to embrace low carb keto. So hearing him and his presentation about where he'd come from, obviously the trial and obviously his vision for the future was really, really moving. And certainly the last couple of minutes of his presentation, he really spoke about, his inspiration in terms of his parents being from the UK, from Liverpool, emigrating to Zimbabwe, and that enabled him the opportunity to become a doctor when he went to medical school in Cape Town. So he talked about quite lovingly, his father and his type 2 diagnosis, and that sort of resonated with him because he now is that same age at the time of his father receiving the diagnosis. And
well, I think actually he was when he was mentioning about that, it was that was a little while ago. I'm sure we're a few years on now. I think I heard him speaking in another interview that he's a bit older than that now. I think he was mentioning that in reference to when he got to that age and he thought, am I going to die 10 years from now?
In 10 years from now.
And now I need to do something about it.
But what he knows of looking back on his early test results, because obviously as a researching sports scientist, he actually did a lot of his own self-study. So he could actually now, looking back with the knowledge that he has about type 2 diabetes and insulin levels, he could see quite clearly how insulin resistant he was becoming through a lot of the studies that he did on himself. But ultimately his own type 2 diagnosis, as many people know, that comes a lot later.
Yeah, I love his transparency and his willingness to stand up and say how he repeatedly got things wrong. I mean, that was my introduction to him, watching the Serial Killers movie and that great scene at the beginning where he just rips pages out of his book and throws them in the bin and says, I got it all wrong. And he spent probably at least half of the presentation showing us slide upon slide upon slide how about all the studies he was doing, and that it was kind of staring him in the face. With hindsight, he can see, it wasn't about the sugar, it wasn't about the carbohydrates, that they weren't the things that he should have been focusing on. He should have been looking at the fat and the impact fat has. And I love the way he does that. I love the way he happily stands there and shows us as a teaching moment how easy it is to have this confirmation bias, looking for the answers you want and being able to find them and dismissing what's right in front of you, that actually those answers were there for him, but he just didn't want to see them.
And that's right. I mean, certainly he was very transparent about his own cognitive dissonance, that the explanation and the dominant paradigm for him was all about carbohydrates. And that's when he was talking about how carbohydrate fueling became his main theory and his main practice, and also in making the gels. So he obviously manufactured these refueling gels. So yeah, he was very transparent, and he was also equally transparent about what was happening with the trial against the South African Health Professionals Council, and explaining how the biases within the South African Dietetics Association, and how that sort of emerged obviously through his trial and subsequent appeal, which the outcome of which is yet to be determined. So we do hope that there's a favourable outcome for Professor Noakes in terms of the trial.
Exactly, and it was shocking, I thought, slide after slide after slide that just showed how, the trial should never have come about, let alone, have gone on for so long, and how incredibly hurtful it was to have these people turn against him, ex-students of his, people who he trusted and liked to just turn against him like that. That must be so deeply hurtful, and it's a testament to him that he's come out of it with his sanity, and I know he puts pretty well all of that down to his wife in particular. He made a big point of thanking her, didn't he? But also the team around him that gave their time and all the expense that went into that. He told us in great detail about the legal team, about Tim's Angels, all the people who helped him. And I think when people give of themselves so much, it's a testament to what an incredible man he is, that they're prepared to do that.
Most definitely. And he mentioned about the legal team donating, what would be equivalent to at least $1 million of their time, if they had to charge.
I think so. It was a lot of money, yeah,
to be able to do that, because they also believe in the veracity of his case. There is no case to answer here. So it's just where he showed the evidence of the email correspondence between some of the players, the stakeholders whose vested interests follow the money, as they say.
Exactly. It was very, very clear, wasn't it? And by the time he got up to do his presentation, I think he'd already had about 3 standing ovations from other speakers mentioning him. But the point at which the entire audience was in tears was at the end, wasn't it? When he played You'll Never Walk Alone by Gerry and the Pacemakers, and in reference back to his parents coming from Liverpool. And it was just so moving, and everyone stood up at the beginning of that track and just clapped for the entire music track. And like I say, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, was there? I mean, I found it incredibly moving. There's something about, isn't there, that emotion en masse, the music, him standing there at the front. It was overwhelming.
Yeah, you're giving me goosebumps again. So
I know, just thinking about it.
It certainly was a lot of love in the room, and that we were very appreciative of the stand that he was taking, the transparency of his account, and just the injustice by which he's had to endure now for at least, 4 years at least?
I think so, yeah. Too long.
It's far too long. So,
and still not completely over.
No, the man is true to form, and to see him with your very own eyes. I mean, you mentioned about Serial Killers, the movie. You may have seen him and heard him on numerous podcasts and YouTube videos. What you see is what you get, and there's no fakery about it.
Genuinely nice man, and happy to take multiple selfies with people. Had great cues, didn't he?
Great cues to line up for the one selfie.
Exactly. Well, I mean, it was a fantastic conference. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was made all the special to be able to share it with you. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you for keeping me company. It was great to finally meet the Ms. D in real life.
And it was great to finally meet you. There's something, isn't there, about communicating with people online for a long time, but it takes it to a whole different level when you get to hug them in person.
Thank you.
So thank you, Louise. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And we'll be seeing you soon at Keto Fest. And
yeah, look out for us both at Keto Fest. Come join us there.
I don't know if they'll let us in the country, will they? I don't know if they can take on two of us.
No, I've got my Esther now. There's no turning back.
I'll have to notify Border Security.
To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/KetoWoman or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman podcast website. It's thanks to the two keto dudes that I'm hosting this podcast, so please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. For this week's end quote, I thought I'd do something slightly different. One of the PHC volunteers you heard from earlier wrote a poem that she read out on stage for Sam Feltham. I got a recording from her during the coffee break, so please bear with the clattering in the background. Here is Jackie Wood with her poem for Sam.
Right, the poem's called Thank You, Sam. When you walk through a storm, you may get wet and muddy and tired and cold. But when with friends, you need not to fret. Your approach can be brave and bold. With a leader like Sam and a team who believe, when spoken, change is in our tone. Please take with you today, as you now leave, we will never again walk alone.
Fabulous. I think that might cause a few more tears. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.